There was once a city where no one showed their real face. Every person, from the youngest child to the oldest elder, wore a mask. Not just one mask, but many. A mask for smiling, a mask for sadness, a mask for anger, fear, joy, pride. People switched them depending on how they wanted to be seen. But no one ever wore their true face anymore. In this city, high above a cobbled street filled with candlelight and fog, stood a small wooden shop. Its sign creaked gently in the wind and read, "Lelio, Master of Masks." Inside, the shelves overflowed with masks, beautiful ones, strange ones, masks that shimmered and masks that wept. And sweeping the floors every morning was a quiet, curious boy named Emil. Emil was 12, an orphan, and the mask maker's only apprentice. He'd never worn a mask himself. Not once. Lelio always scolded him for it. "If people see your real face," Lelio would say, "they'll see your weakness." But Emil didn't understand. He liked watching people's eyes, trying to guess what they truly felt beneath the painted smiles and polished frowns. Late at night, when the streets were empty and Lelio had gone to sleep, Emil would sit by the window and sketch faces, not masks, but real ones. Faces full of mixed emotions, nervous joy, hopeful fear, laughter hiding pain. And he wondered, what if there was a mask that could show all those feelings at once? A mask that didn't hide you, but helped people understand you? That night, under the glow of a single lantern, Emil drew something new. A mask that shimmered like glass but shifted like water. He didn't know it yet, but the world was about to change, and he would be the one to change it. The next morning, the shop smelled of cedarwood and old paint. Lelio was already awake, polishing a mask shaped like a laughing cat. His hands were wrinkled and precise. His eyes, sharp as knives behind his own mask, an elegant one with golden swirls that never changed expression. Emil yawned as he stepped out from the small loft above the workshop. "You were drawing again last night, weren't you?" Lelio said without looking up. Emil froze. "How did you know?" "I always know." Lelio held up the cat mask to the light. "I hear your pencil move like a nervous bird." He didn't sound angry, but Emil still tucked his sketchbook deeper into his satchel, just in case. Lelio turned toward him, mask gleaming. "There are 3 rules in this shop," he said, as he did every morning. "Say them." Emil sighed and repeated them quietly. 1. A mask must hide the true face. 2. A mask must never reveal emotion not chosen. 3. A mask must fit the person, not the other way around. "Good," Lelio said. "Now clean the window." The rain smudged the glass. As Emil wiped the pane, he looked out onto the street. People passed by, masks shining under the gray sky. No smiles, no frowns, just chosen shapes. He whispered to the glass, what if a mask could help people show what they can't say? He imagined one, transparent, ever-shifting, soft like water and light. Behind him, Lelio muttered, "No one wants to be truly seen, boy. They want to be accepted, not understood." But Emil wasn't so sure. He turned back toward the shop, where 100 faces stared silently from the walls. And he made a quiet promise to himself. One day, he would make the mask that changed everything. Later that evening, Emil sat alone at the workbench. Lelio had gone upstairs, the shop was quiet, and only the soft ticking of the clock kept him company. Emil unrolled his sketch. The strange one. The mask that shimmered in pencil strokes, like it was drawn with water and wind instead of graphite. It didn't smile or frown. It didn't pretend to be anything. It simply glowed. He whispered to himself, "You don't hide people. You help them speak." Then, with quiet care, he reached for a new sheet of parchment and began to redraw the mask, this time slower, gentler, as if he were tracing something already alive. The candle beside him flickered. As he shaded the lines, he noticed something impossible. The mask on the page was glowing. Not from the candlelight. From within. He blinked. Looked again. And the glow faded. Was it real? Or had he wished it so hard that his heart convinced his eyes? Emil touched the paper. It felt warm. He leaned back and stared. What kind of mask glows without fire? What kind of mask listens? What kind of mask? Dreams? He didn't know. Not yet. But something had begun. And in the corner of the shop, among the carved expressions of joy and fear and anger, a small, unnoticed mask cracked ever so slightly, as if something inside had finally breathed. The morning air was cold and sharp. Emil had just finished dusting the shelves when the doorbell chimed softly. A customer stepped in. She wore a long grey cloak, damp from the fog outside. But what caught Emil's eye wasn't the cloak. It was her face. She wasn't wearing a mask. Not even one. Her expression was gentle, but tired. Her eyes looked straight into Emil's, as if she'd been searching for someone brave enough to meet her gaze. Emil stood frozen. Behind him, Lelio stepped forward quickly, his voice clipped. "You forgot your mask, madam." "I didn't forget," the woman said calmly. "I'm looking for one, but not one to hide in." Lelio tensed. "We don't make masks for display. They serve a purpose." "I know," she replied. "But I've worn too many masks in my life. I want one that lets me feel, not just pretend." Emil's heart stirred. The drawing from last night returned to his mind, the mask of light and water. The woman continued, "I'm a singer. I used to perform with joy. But after I lost my son, I kept smiling, kept wearing the happy mask. And now, I don't even remember how I truly feel. I want something real again. Something soft, honest." Silence filled the shop. Lelio turned away. "We cannot help you." The woman bowed her head and walked slowly toward the door. But just before she stepped out, Emil called after her, "Wait." She turned. Emil walked over and quietly handed her a folded sketch from his satchel. A mask, unlike any other. Fluid. Soft. Open. The woman stared at it for a long moment. Then she smiled, not politely, not with effort, but something smaller and true. "Thank you," she whispered. When she left, Lelio didn't say a word. But Emil knew. That sketch was no longer just an idea. It was the beginning of something that could change everything. That night, Emil couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the woman's eyes, how they shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper. Hope. He tiptoed down from his loft and lit the smallest lantern in the workshop. The shadows of masks danced along the walls as he sat at the workbench. He pulled out his sketch again. A mask that didn't pretend. A mask that shimmered with truth. He touched the edges of the paper with his fingers and whispered, "I wish you could be real." and the lantern flickered. For a moment, just a heartbeat, he thought the sketch glowed. Then the room fell quiet again. Emil didn't know that outside, the night wind had paused at the window, that something ancient had stirred in the wood grain of the bench, and that somewhere, deep in the city where masks were law, a mask was beginning to dream. In his sleep, Emil dreamed too. He stood in a forest of masks. They hung from trees like fruit. Some smiled gently, others wept silently. And in the center of the forest, floating above a pool of light, was his mask. The watery one. The honest one. It pulsed like a heartbeat. And it whispered his name. Emil. He reached out. But before he could touch it, the dream broke. He woke with the paper still under his cheek, his fingers clutching it tight. And the mask on the paper was wet, as if it had cried. The next morning, the shop felt different. Lelio noticed it too. He moved slower, his fingers pausing more often over his tools. His golden mask shone as always, but something in his shoulders seemed heavy. Emil sat quietly at the corner bench. He didn't speak of the dream, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. He pulled out the same sketch, now worn and folded. To his surprise, something had changed. The pencil lines shimmered faintly. The mask drawn on the page looked less like a picture and more like a memory. That afternoon, a child entered the shop. A boy, younger than Emil, tugging his mother's sleeve. He pointed at the shelves filled with masks. "Do any of them smile and cry at the same time?" he asked softly. His mother gave a tired laugh. "That's not how masks work, darling." But Emil stepped forward. "Maybe it is." He walked to the workbench and carefully unfolded his glowing sketch. The boy's eyes lit up. "That one," he said. "It looks like how I feel when I think of my grandpa. I miss him, but I also smile when I remember him." His mother froze. Then slowly, she knelt beside her son, both of them staring at the sketch. Behind them, Lelio stood in the doorway. He didn't speak for a long time. Then, for the first time Emil had ever seen, Lelio reached up and removed his mask. His face was older than Emil expected. Soft, worn, tired, but honest. "Perhaps," Lelio said quietly, "some masks aren't meant to be made." He turned to Emil. "Until the world is ready for them." By the next morning, news had spread. Not loud and fast like gossip, but quietly, like a breeze that slipped beneath doors and brushed over rooftops. People began coming to the shop, not just to buy masks, but to talk, to share, to remember what it felt like to feel. A girl came and said she was tired of pretending to be brave. A man asked if there was a mask for starting over. A grandmother brought her granddaughter and whispered, "She's never worn a mask, and I hope she never will." Emil sat at the counter, watching it all unfold. He didn't speak much, but he drew. Page after page. New shapes. Masks that softened. That shimmered. That didn't hide but revealed. Just enough. And something beautiful happened. People began to ask for masks that weren't just one thing. Not happy or sad, but both. Hopeful and grieving. Lonely but trying. Like people really are. And Lelio changed too. He began carving again. But slower now. Gentler. One afternoon, he gave Emil a chisel and said, "Try." Emil hesitated. but I don't know how." "You do," Lelio said. "You just never believed you could." So Emil carved. Not perfect, but real. That night, as the two of them swept the floor, Lelio looked out the shop window. A boy was walking by. No mask on. Just a face. Open. Honest. And smiling. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold and pink. Inside the mask shop, everything felt still, but full. Shelves no longer held rows of cold, stiff masks. Instead, they glowed with gentle curves and warm tones. Masks that looked almost alive, like they had stories waiting inside them. Emil stood by the window, watching as people walked by. Some still wore masks, but many didn't. They smiled, frowned, laughed, cried. Faces that were once hidden, now shone in the open air. He turned as Lelio came beside him, holding a simple wooden box. "This is yours now," Lelio said quietly. "The shop, the work, the choice." Emil's hands trembled as he opened the lid. Inside was the silver feather chisel, smooth, elegant, and old. "Why me?" Emil asked. Lelio smiled, eyes soft. "Because you remembered what I forgot." They stood in silence as the last light poured through the window. That evening, Emil stayed alone in the shop, a candle flickering beside him. He placed a single mask on the table. It was his. The watery one. It didn't hide anything. But when he looked at it, he saw everything. His fear. His joy. His sadness. His love. All held together, gently, like a promise. Emil didn't put it on. He didn't need to. He simply looked into its eyes, and smiled. And outside, the city shimmered with faces. Not perfect, but real.